I never thought everything could collapse with a single cold ting from my phone. The bank notification slid across the screen. Your balance is below the warning level. I tapped it open out of habit and felt like I had just fallen off a suspension bridge. Our joint savings account, the one we had carefully built for years, was nearly empty. The wedding money, the down payment for an apartment, the emergency fund, all gone, evaporated in silence. For a few seconds, I couldn't tell if my heart was pounding from anger or fear. All I knew was that my eyes were glued to the emotionless text. Restaurant, hotel, airline ticket, boutique. A string of luxury addresses flashed like a neon sign stabbing into my eyes. I looked up. He was standing at the kitchen counter, his back to me, pouring coffee just like any other morning. The piece of it all was provocative. His straight shoulders, his perfectly ironed shirt, the faint scent of his cologne. I heard myself ask, my voice so low it sounded like it belonged to someone else. "What did you use our money for?" He didn't turn around. His spoon clinked softly against the cup. "Necessities," he said, calmly stirring in more sugar. "We'll make it back." "Necessities?" I repeated, emphasizing each word as if I had misheard. "What are these charges? A restaurant I've never been to, a beachside hotel on a weekend I was working all day, a plane ticket to—" I swallowed hard. "To where?" He set the cup down and finally turned to face me. His expression was so calm it was shameless. "Don't be so dramatic. I'll sort it out. We're fine." His answer was like a slap that didn't hurt but burned. That calmness chilled me. I saw no embarrassment, no flicker of remorse, just a look of exhaustion, as if I were the one causing trouble. I held up my phone, the screen glowing with red numbers. Fine? Is an account near zero fine? Is the wedding money, our future disappearing over a few weekends fine? He smirked. "Don't say we as if you did it all yourself. I have my own plans." Plans. I heard the word roll across the floor like a button that had popped off, coming to a stop at my feet, waiting to be crushed. The kitchen suddenly felt vast and foreign, as if I were standing in someone else's house. Just a few minutes ago, I thought I was an irreplaceable half of a whole. Now, I felt like a decorative object, nice to have around, but no one would notice if it was gone. "Are you seeing someone else?" I asked. The question was a sharp, small needle, piercing the polished silence of his voice. He looked at me for another beat, then turned to grab his suit jacket. "Don't overreact. I'm busy. We'll talk later." The door closed as softly as an eye blink, but I heard it shut with the finality of a coffin lid. I stood in the impeccably clean, soulless kitchen, my hands still gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles were white. I felt as if I had been neatly and cleanly removed from my own life, with no blood, no screams. And what suffocated me wasn't the number in the bank account, but his attitude, indifferent, dismissive, contemptuous. That afternoon, I sat at the dining table and spread out the bank statements like a deck of cards. Each line was a thread, stitching together a story I had never been told. A fancy restaurant more than 10 miles from our apartment, a table for two. A series of beachfront hotels that coincided with the weekends he was away on business. Special gifts noted with boutique item codes. It all appeared like a long exposure photograph, a streak of light, silently tracing the path of two people I didn't know. Every receipt was a slice thin, sharp, and brutally precise. I'm not a weak person, nor am I the type to fall apart. But I won't deny that there were moments I leaned back in my chair, my hands gripping the edge of the table until they were numb, and asked myself, why? Not, why did you cheat? That question is too easy and too useless. I wanted to know, why did you think I didn't deserve to know the truth? And why did you choose to use the very money I earned to build weekends that didn't include me? If anyone listening has found themselves in these words being made to feel like an outsider in their own life, their voice silenced by a calm smile, I hope you'll leave a few lines below. Not to complain, but to know that there are others who have walked through that same darkness and have come back to tell the tale in a steady voice. That evening, he came home late. The scent of a strange perfume clung to him like a thin smoke. He hung up his coat, placed his keys on the table, and opened the fridge to pour a glass of water, as if everything were disgustingly normal. I stood in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. "Explain yourself," I said, my voice hoarse and slow. At least to the person you promised to call your fiancé. He looked up, his eyes tired. Do you really want to argue now? I have a meeting in the morning. I told you. I'll sort it out. Sort what out? I stepped closer and placed the stack of papers on the glass table. Sort out how to keep using my money for someone else? Sort out how to turn our marriage into an expensive play? I laughed, a sound so dry it was like someone tapping their fingernails on the glass. So tell me why I'm not in any of these receipts. Tell me where the plane ticket was for. Tell me how many candles were on the table for two during your overtime nights. The silence stretched long enough for the answer to take shape. He had no answer that wouldn't incriminate himself, and so he chose the easiest option. I'm tired, he said, picking up his keys. I'm going out. We'll talk when you've calmed down. I didn't stop him. The door closed behind him again, the sound of the lock clicking into place. I stood for another minute, listening as my heart taught itself to beat steadily again. Then, I put on my coat, grabbed my purse, and walked out. If he thought I would sit and wait in this house, smelling someone else's perfume and telling myself everything will be fine, he was mistaken. That night, a light rain was falling like mist. I sat in my car, the streetlights smearing across the windshield in yellow streaks. I didn't have a grand plan. I just wanted to see the truth with my own eyes, not through bank statements, not through the chime of a notification. The truth sometimes needs an image to stop all the doubts from running in circles like mice. He stopped in front of a rooftop restaurant. Warm lights, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, large chandeliers like clouds hanging at eye level. I killed the engine and sat still. He got out, pulled out his phone, and smiled. A soft, subtle smile, the kind he had been rationing with me lately. A few minutes later, a woman appeared, a sleek, dark dress, her hair flowing, her stride confident, as if she knew the way. He opened the door for her, his hand lightly touching her elbow in a quiet, intimate gesture. They walked in together, without looking around, without any fear of being seen. They walked into the light as if it were a well-rehearsed play with a single, forgotten audience member left outside. I didn't go in. I didn't want to make a scene. I sat in the darkness of my car, my fingers unconsciously tracing meaningless curves on the fogged-up glass. The truth was big enough. It didn't need me to shout to make it any more real. It turns out that pain isn't loud. It pours over you silently, like rain, seeping through your coat, your skin, through all the words I had once told myself. I'll be fine. I'm strong. I just sat there, listening to the music from somewhere mixed with the sound of the rain, and I remembered the night he proposed. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were bright. I had believed that man would hold my hand through every storm. I never imagined he would be the one holding the umbrella for someone else. I got home when the night had grown thick. I tidied the table, arranging the receipts by date, marking the matching weekends with a pencil, the times he was away on business at the same location. On one page I wrote, "Why?" On another, "For how long?" I wasn't an investigator. I was just a person trying to name what had happened, as a way of reclaiming ownership of my own story. The next morning, when he came home, I was waiting. The initial trembling was gone. Only a quiet resolve remained. He opened the door, stumbling slightly in surprise. I pointed to a chair. He sat, silent, his hands clenching his keys. I placed a photo of him and her on the glass table, a blurry shot through the wall, but clear enough to see them leaning into each other in the soft light. I didn't need to see their faces clearly. I needed to see their attitude clearly. Then I added a stack of receipts. Then the plane tickets. I didn't say, "You cheated on me." I placed his world in front of him and let him name it himself. His face changed. Some people, when caught, shatter like glass. Others, like him, choose to freeze. He didn't grab for the papers, didn't deny it, didn't apologize. He just sat there, looking at it all as if it were a collection of photos that had nothing to do with him. But his hands. I saw his knuckles turn white, a small detail that was enough to tell me a storm was raging inside the man who was supposed to never lose his cool. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. "I want the truth," I replied, "and I want you to look at me when you say it." After a long moment, he exhaled. "I was wrong," he said quickly, as if to cut the conversation short. "I'll transfer the money back. No," I interrupted. "I'm not asking how you plan to fix this with money. I'm asking, why? Why did you give the best parts of yourself, your time, your attention, your tenderness to someone else, and then bring the silence and the hurt home to me? Why did you think everything could be sorted out with a bank transfer?" He didn't answer. His gaze drifted somewhere behind me. I knew I had hit the empty space he didn't want to name. The silence stretched, so thin that a single sharp breath could have torn it. I didn't tear it. I let it lie there between us, like a hairline crack on a pane of glass. I gathered the papers, my hands steady. "The rest," I said, "I'll leave to the light." If you've listened this far and see yourself even a small part in this story, perhaps we should stay in touch. Sometimes just a line in the comments, "I've been there too," is enough to make someone feel less alone. And if you want to follow me to the end of this story, not for a dramatic conclusion, but to see how a woman can pull herself out of the swamp of betrayal, you can stay. I will continue to tell it, calmly, honestly, and without skipping any of the hidden corners of the heart. I stood up. He remained seated, seemingly unsure of what to do with his hands. For a fleeting moment, I pitied the old me. The one who believed that winning was about holding on to a man. It turns out, winning is about holding on to yourself. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtains. The light flooded in, breaking into squares on the floor. On the glass table, the bolded numbers suddenly looked tamer in the sun. And I, for the first time in weeks, took a deep, full breath that didn't smell of a strange perfume. There were no grand pronouncements, no vows or pleas. Just a man stripped of his calm facade, a woman who had let go of her pleading tone, and the truth, sitting down in a chair like a guest who had arrived on time. And I knew that once the truth had taken a seat, everything else, the excuses, the self-deception, would get up and leave. I didn't chase after them. I had my own work to do, to gather the pieces of my life, glue them back together with resolve, and walk on my own 2 feet. I didn't ask him how he would explain it to his friends, to his family. I didn't care what he would say to her. I just washed a glass, cleared a chair, and deleted the self-reassuring texts from my phone. There are days when a person wins, not by doing something extraordinary, but by decisively stopping the things that make them smaller. Outside the window, the sun was shining. I took the stack of papers, tapped them once to straighten them, and placed them in a file folder. Not to end something, but to begin again, more neatly. Inside, the clock was still ticking, a steady rhythm, the one thing that had never betrayed me. I smiled, a very small smile. Time and I still had each other. And that was enough to start over. I began to realize the cracks weren't just in our bank account or in the cold silence of our meals. They were in the eyes of our friends, in the questions I couldn't answer. Friends would ask, "You look so tired lately. Is everything okay?" I would just give a weak smile and say, "Just work." My mother would call, worried. "When are you two setting a wedding date?" I would take a deep breath and say curtly, "We're still planning, Mom." Each lie was like a small stone dropping into my chest, piling up into a heavy weight. I didn't want anyone to see that I was being pushed to the side of my own life, but the truth was, I had been pushed out a long time ago. He still came home, still hung his coat on the rack, still ate dinner with me when it was convenient. But there was a distance between us, like a scratch on a mirror. On the surface, everything looked intact, but when you looked closer, the reflection was distorted. We would sit across from each other, 2 shadows, eating, making small talk. Sometimes his eyes would meet mine, but his gaze would slide away as quickly as a stranger, brushing past you on a crowded street. There was no more us, only me and him at the same table. I remained silent, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to watch him expose himself. I kept a small notebook, documenting the new expenses. Hotels, gifts, plane tickets, as regular as appointments. Each page was a piece of evidence, a cut into the love I once believed was eternal. I didn't want to be led by tears. I wanted the truth to be clear, in every word, every number. I wanted that when I stood up to leave, I could do so without any regret of not having enough proof. One evening, he left his phone on the table. A message popped up, the name Rebecca dancing on the screen. I didn't need to open it. The one-line preview was enough to kill any lingering doubt. Thanks for the weekend. I can still taste the wine on the balcony and the look in your eyes. My hands went cold, my heart pounded. But strangely, I didn't cry. A calm, cold clarity washed over me. It turned out my intuition wasn't crazy. It was just an alarm bell for a truth I didn't want to admit. I closed the phone and put it back where it was. When he came back and asked with a smile, "Want to watch a movie?" I looked at that smile and realized it had once made me melt. Now, it just made him seem like a stranger, a talented actor who only remembered his lines when he was in front of me. I nodded. "Sure, put it on." My voice sounded so normal it surprised me. But inside, a chess game had begun. The next day, I took a day off. I went to the bank and asked for the last 6 months of transaction records. The teller handed me a thick stack of papers. I held it, and it felt as heavy as the truth he had been hiding. I sat in a cafe and went through it page by page. A pattern emerged. Cash withdrawals on the same days he was working late. Payments on the same days I had to visit my mother out of town. Flights to the same destinations we had postponed our own trips to save money. He wasn't saving. He was investing, but in a love that didn't include me. I decided I wouldn't just be a witness. I needed to make him see who he was dealing with. I asked him to meet me that evening, saying, "We need to talk." My voice was calm, but I knew he sensed something was different, because his eyes flickered away. He arrived, his shirt neat, his tie straight, like someone preparing for a business negotiation. I spread the stack of papers on the table. No introduction was needed. The numbers spoke for themselves. He glanced at them, then leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "What are you trying to do? Put me on trial?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm trying to give you a chance to tell the truth. That's all." He gave a small, bitter laugh, trying to maintain his composure, but his hand under the table was tapping an anxious rhythm. "What do you want to hear? That I was wrong? That I made a mistake? What will you get out of it?" I tilted my head. "I don't need your apology. I just want to know if you still have any respect for my intelligence, because only someone who looks down on you would think they could hide this forever." Silence. He couldn't say anything. And then I saw something strange. He froze. The blood drained from his face, and his eyes went blank. The moment I laid the truth in front of him, his entire calm facade shattered. He was no longer the man who had promised to hold my hand for the rest of our lives. He was just a man who had been stripped bare, helpless in his silence. I sat there, not needing to scream, not needing to cry. The power was in the way I was still breathing steadily, in the way I held his gaze without blinking. He was the one who was scared. He was the one who had to find a way out. If you've listened this far, you probably understand why I chose to tell this story. Not to hold on to a cheater, but to remind anyone who has been pushed into a dark corner, the truth can hurt, but it is also the only weapon you have to reclaim yourself. And if you've been through something similar, I hope you'll share your story below. Maybe your words will help someone else find the strength to move on. He avoided me for a few days. He would leave early, come back late, the strange perfume clinging to him, his shirt smelling of a different laundry detergent. I didn't ask, didn't block the door, didn't cry anymore. My silence turned the house into a pressure cooker. Every sound was amplified: the turn of the key, the footsteps, the clink of a glass on the table. And in every sound, I heard the distance between us. I started to change. Not to keep him, but to keep myself. I gathered all the documents related to our accounts, our contracts, the money I had contributed. I made detailed notes, highlighting them in red. I contacted the bank and asked about my rights. I met with a lawyer just to hear what I could do if everything fell apart. I realized that once you look the truth straight in the eye, you stop being afraid of it. Meanwhile, he was still trying to live as if everything were normal. He would ask, "What do you want for dinner?" I would reply, "Whatever." He would smile and say, "You've been so quiet lately." I would just look at him and not answer. That was the first time I saw him lose his composure. He slammed his spoon down on his bowl, the sound echoing in the kitchen. You can't just be silent like this forever. I looked him straight in the eye. You're right. We can't be silent forever. But if you're not going to tell the truth, then silence is better than lies. He stood up and muttered something I couldn't hear. The door closed again. This time, I didn't tremble. I knew I was slowly taking back control. He could leave, but I was the one who would decide what was left. One evening, I came home late after meeting with my lawyer. The house was dark, except for the light from the bedroom. I walked in and saw him sitting at the desk. The stack of papers I had hidden in a drawer was laid out on the table. He looked up, his eyes dark. "What are you planning to do with these?" I gave a small smile. "I don't have to plan anything. The truth knows how to find its own way." He took a receipt, crumpled it in his fist, and threw it on the floor. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. I was trapped." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. Trapped to the point of using my money to support someone else? Trapped to the point of making me an outsider in my own life? If that's what you call no choice, then you're right. I don't understand, and I don't need to. I didn't answer. His words only proved one thing. I had never been his love. I was just the pillar he used to prop up a life of lies. And now that the pillar was about to fall, he had finally noticed. If you're listening and see yourself in this situation, I want to say one thing. No one is worth selling your own self-respect to keep. Please comment if you've been in a similar situation. Maybe your story will be the hand that pulls someone else out of the mud. And if you want to follow me to the deeper parts of this truth, don't forget to stay with me. This story has only just scratched the surface. I remember so clearly the evening everything shattered. It was raining, a persistent drizzle, as if someone were trying to wash away a stain on the pavement that would never come clean. I received a strange text, an unsaved number, just a photo and a short message. "He's here." The photo was of my fiancé, his arm casually draped over a woman's shoulder, both of them walking into a fancy bar. The warm yellow light made them look like a perfect couple. I sat in silence for a moment, my hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my skin. My heart was no longer pounding with shock. It was a slow, heavy, steady drumbeat, signaling a coming storm. I didn't call, didn't text, I drove there. The bar was loud, the music a physical thud against my chest. I scanned the room, and then I saw them in a corner. He was sitting close to her, whispering something that made her laugh and lean her head on his shoulder. That smile, it was the same smile he used to give me, back when we still believed in a wedding. I didn't rush over. I walked slowly, step by step. As my shadow fell over their table, I saw the woman look up, her smile freezing on her lips. My fiancé turned. In that instant, his face went rigid. Just like the title of a movie, Frozen. "We need to talk," I said, my voice clear, steady, loud enough to cut through the music. The woman scrambled to stand up, but I placed a hand on the back of her chair and gently pushed down. "No need to go anywhere. It'll be more efficient if you both hear this." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting around. You're misunderstanding." I laughed, a sound as cold as shattering glass. "Misunderstanding? You used my money to support her, the hotel bills, the plane tickets, the gifts. It's all here." I pulled a neat stack of papers from my purse and dropped it on the table. The papers fluttered down, a few sliding to the floor. The yellow light illuminated the numbers, as clear as if they had been etched with a knife. The woman's eyes widened, her lips trembling. You said..." "What did he say?" I cut her off, my eyes still fixed on the man who had promised to be my husband. "Did he tell you this money was his? That he could give you a life of luxury? That's funny. It was all my sweat and tears. I trusted him, I contributed every penny to our future, and he turned it into a plane ticket for his trips with you." He shot up from his chair, reaching for the papers, but I held them down. "Don't. The more you grab, the more pathetic you look." The bar was no longer as loud. I could feel the eyes of the other patrons on us, but I wasn't ashamed. I felt like I had just ripped off the mask he had been wearing for so long, right in the middle of a crowd. He stood there, frozen, his hands hanging limp at his sides, his eyes darting around before finally settling on me. I could see in them no love, no clever lies, just the panic of a man who had been cornered. I picked up a fallen piece of paper and held it out to the woman. "You should see this. This is the price of your wine and your balcony smiles." The price another woman had to pay. The woman glanced at it, her face pale. He said this was his money." I smiled bitterly. "So it wasn't just me who was fooled. Congratulations, we have something in common." He suddenly roared, "That's enough." The roar couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. People at the surrounding tables sat up straighter, a few looking annoyed. He clenched his fists, then let them go, knowing there was no way to deny it. I took a step back, my voice even. "You took years of my trust, but you won't take another second." I turned and walked out of the bar, leaving behind two frozen faces. The glass door closed, sealing the music behind me. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving shimmering puddles under the streetlights. I stood there, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, the air outside didn't feel heavy. If you're listening to this, you probably understand that moment, the moment when pain turns into strength. If you've ever had to stand up to a betrayer, please leave a few lines below. Not to relive the pain, but to affirm, you got through it, and you are stronger for it. I don't remember how long I drove that night. The city was bright, the traffic steady, but in my eyes, everything was a silent blur. I stopped at a familiar bridge, turned off the engine, and rolled down the window. The night air was cold but easy to breathe. I rested my head on the steering wheel, not crying. It was as if my tears had long since dried up. All that was left was an emptiness, but that emptiness created a new space, a space for me to start rebuilding my life. The next morning, I went to work as usual. My colleagues greeted me, talked about work. No one knew that the night before, I had broken off my engagement. I still smiled, still wrote my reports, still answered my emails. But inside, I had made a promise to myself. From this day on, I would not let myself be disrespected again. I might fall, but I would not stay down. That evening, I returned to the apartment. He wasn't home. I opened a suitcase and started to pack. My clothes, my documents, a few keepsakes. I didn't take everything. I left behind the things that were connected to him. The matching mugs, the photo on the wall, the movie tickets tucked in a box. I didn't need to take our past with me. I just needed to take myself. The phone rang. It was him. I watched the screen light up, then go dark. He called again and again. I didn't answer. Finally, a text came through. "Please don't go. We can talk. I'll fix it." I gave a small, bitter smile. Betrayers always think they can fix things with an apology or a new promise. But some cracks, once they appear, can never be glued back together. I pulled my suitcase to the door. Just then, he appeared. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair a mess, his eyes frantic. He stood in front of the door, his voice urgent. "Don't go. I was wrong. I can't lose you." I looked him straight in the eye. "You lost me the moment you chose her over me. The moment you used my money to fund a life of lies. You just didn't realize it yet." He was stunned, as if he had just heard a verdict. I pushed my suitcase past him. He couldn't stop me. I walked away without looking back. In the hallway, I pressed the elevator button. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, hurt, but there was something else there too, a resolve I had never seen before. I suddenly realized I was no longer the woman who trembled in front of a bank statement. I was different. The months that followed were not easy. I had to find a new place to live, sort out our finances, and face the questions from family and friends. Some nights I would lie awake, thinking about all the years that had passed. Sometimes the tears would still come, not because I missed him, but because I felt sorry for my old self, for my trust, for my innocence. But then I learned to stop blaming myself. I started a journal, writing down my thoughts, my steps toward recovery. I started running in the mornings, to keep my body healthy and my mind clear. I joined a painting class, something I had always loved but had given up to focus on our shared future. Every day I would remind myself, I deserve a love that is not a lie. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing. I would never again let anyone make me an outsider in my own story. If you have been betrayed, you probably understand this feeling. The feeling of getting back on your feet after being knocked down. If you're going through it now, please leave a few lines below. Maybe just a simple, "I've been there too," is enough to make someone feel less alone. And if you want to walk this journey with me, remember to follow so you don't miss out. Because from here on, I will tell you how I turned my wounds into strength. I realized that to truly escape the darkness, I couldn't just leave. I had to take back everything that was mine. He hadn't just betrayed my love. He had stolen my trust, my money, and would have stolen my reputation if I had let him. I refused to be a silent victim in my own story. He was still trying to contact me. Texts, calls, even emails. Once, he wrote, "I've already lost everything. Don't make me lose my reputation too." I read it and felt a bitter taste in my mouth. What reputation? The reputation of a man who used his fiancée's money to support his mistress? He was worried about his own image. But what about mine? I deleted it all. I no longer had any obligation to protect him. One morning I received a call from a former colleague of his. She lowered her voice as if afraid of being overheard. "I think you should know. His affair with Rebecca is no longer a secret. The office is buzzing. They've found some questionable expenses, and his boss is getting suspicious." I was silent for a few seconds, then said quietly, "Thank you. I know what I need to do." That evening, I gathered all the documents, the receipts, the statements, all the evidence. I organized them into neat files, not missing a single detail. I didn't want to expose him in a fit of rage. I wanted the truth to be so sharp that no one could deny it. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week later, his company held a major meeting. I knew about it because I still had a few contacts there. I wore a simple dress, not to make a statement, but to feel grounded. I walked into the lobby, and all eyes turned to me. And then I saw him sitting at the head table, his face tense, with Rebecca a few seats away. I didn't speak right away. I waited for the right moment, when the discussion turned to finances and company funds. I stood up, walked to the front, and said clearly, "I think everyone needs to see these documents." I placed the file on the table. The entire room fell silent. He shot to his feet, his eyes panicked. "What are you doing?" I looked him straight in the eye, so calm it surprised even me. "I'm doing what you should have done a long time ago, telling the truth." Ugh. I opened the file page by page. The hotel bills, the plane tickets, the cash withdrawal statements. Every detail he thought would disappear. Each paper that landed on the table was like a knife. I saw Rebecca's face go pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. I saw his boss frown, his eyes as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. I saw him a man who had once been so proud, now frozen, unable to find a single word of defense. The room was in an uproar. He tried to say, "This is a private matter." I cut him off. "Number, it's not a private matter when you use someone else's money and turn it into a tool for your betrayal. This is the truth, and the truth has no private boundaries." I gathered the papers and stood up straight. "I'm not here to beg. I'm here to end this. You've taken too much from me. Today, I'm taking back my voice." The room was still, filled only with the rustling of the papers. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard a chair fall. Someone call his name, his boss demanding he sit down now. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to know how they would handle it. For me, that moment was enough. He had been exposed, and I had crossed a line of my own. Outside, the wind was strong. I paused for a few seconds, feeling a deep, full breath fill my lungs. I had done it. I was no longer the one left behind in the kitchen with an empty wallet and a cold stare. I was a woman who had taken back control of her own story. If you're listening to this, I believe you understand that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't screaming at the one who betrayed you, but showing them that they no longer have the power to define who you are. If you have ever stood up like that, please share your story below so that others can see that we are not alone. After that day, I left the company building in silence. The sky was gray, but my heart felt lighter than ever. My phone was buzzing nonstop in my pocket. His number, mutual friends, even a few of his colleagues. I didn't answer. I knew that any words now would just be the last few strings he was trying to wrap around me to hold me back. But I had already cut them. The next day, the news started to spread. a close colleague called me, her voice a mix of a whisper and a cheer. He was suspended right after the meeting. The company is launching an internal investigation. And Rebecca, she was gone by that night. I listened in silence, not feeling joy, not feeling satisfaction, just a quiet relief, like taking off a pair of tight shoes after a long journey. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I rented a small, cozy apartment for one. I redecorated it to my liking. White curtains, a desk by the window, a small plant in the corner of the living room. I signed up for a yoga class, learning to breathe slowly, to let my body and mind settle. I bought a plane ticket and traveled alone, a trip I had always been waiting for, when we have time. Now, there was no more we, just me and the open sky ahead. Every day, I wrote a page in my journal, not just to remember the pain, but to see how I was changing. From victim, I wrote survivor. From abandoned, I wrote chose my own path. I gradually realized that some losses are actually a form of liberation. Once, I ran into him at the supermarket. He had lost a lot of weight, his face was gaunt, and his eyes had dark circles. When our eyes met, he froze, his mouth moving as if to say something. I just gave a polite nod, a greeting you would give a stranger, and pushed my cart past him. I no longer felt a pang in my heart. The man who had once caused me so much pain no longer had any power over me. He was just a ghost, and I had stepped into the light. That night, I sat in my new apartment, watching the city lights flicker outside my window. I made myself a cup of tea, opened my journal, and wrote, "I'm through it." Just those 3 words, but my entire body seemed to relax. I knew I would face more challenges, but I also knew I had the strength to stand firm. If you have been betrayed, I hope you remember one thing. You are not defined by how someone treats you. You are defined by how you get back up after being hurt. If you have been through it and have gotten back up, please share your story below. Your story might just be the guiding light for someone else in the dark. I closed my journal, took a sip of tea, and smiled to myself. I didn't need a man to feel complete. I didn't need a wedding to prove my worth. I just needed myself a woman who had learned to walk through a storm and knew that the sunrise was always waiting on the other side. I saw her one afternoon, several months later, when I walked into a small supermarket near my work. She was no longer the elegant woman in lavish dresses and designer handbags with a haughty look in her eyes. She stood at the checkout counter, clutching a few packs of instant noodles and other cheap items. Her hair was stringy, her face gaunt, her eyes dark-ringed. She looked up, and her eyes met mine. In that moment, all sound seemed to fade. I saw in her eyes no trace of arrogance, only shame and regret. She pressed her lips together as if she wanted to approach me, to say something, but I just gave a small, slight nod, a nod you would give a stranger, and then I turned and walked away. I heard a choked sigh behind me, but I didn't stop. There was no reason for me to turn back. The person who had once made me invisible was now, in the truest sense, gone from my life. And ironically, it was she who had now become the lost shadow in her own life. Stepping out of the supermarket, the golden afternoon sun stretched across the street. I took a deep breath, feeling a lightness in my chest, as if I had just closed the final door. I smiled, not a smile of victory, but the smile of someone who has let go of all the old burdens to walk toward his own light. And perhaps, if you have listened this far, you too have been through some kind of pain, or have witnessed someone emerge from the shadow of betrayal. If so, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. Because sometimes, just knowing that someone else has endured can make us feel so much stronger. And if you want to join me for the next stories where you might just find a piece of yourself, remember to follow the channel, so that when I sit down to tell another story, you won't miss it.